Let's turn tonight to Exodus chapter 5. Exodus chapter 5. We saw last week that Moses returned. He made his way back to the land of Egypt with God's promise. He meets his brother Aaron, who is going to be his mouthpiece, who is going to be his spokesman. And they've met with the elders of Israel, and they've showed the signs, they've showed the miracles, they've spoken of what the Lord had said unto Moses, and the people believed, and the people are ready. And chapter 5 is going to begin, and it's going to set up this contest where Moses is going to go in with the famous words of, let my people go. So that's where we're at. Chapter number 5 begins the real heavy portion here of a contest between Pharaoh and Moses, between Pharaoh, the Egyptians, and Israel. Obviously, many people see in that the contest between God and Satan, God in this world. And we're going to begin that tonight in chapter 5. Now, the title tonight is going to give a little bit away, okay? So let me tell you the title, and you tell me how you think the rest of the night plays out, okay? The title is Off to a Rough Start. Okay? Off to a rough start. But let's go ahead. Let's see what we can get out of chapter 5. Verse number 1. And afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, here's those famous words, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. And you can only really imagine, right, what it would have been like to be Moses and to be Aaron. You have to go in and confront what we would probably assume at this point is the most powerful man in the entire world. The pharaohs of Egypt have been cruel for the last couple of generations to the Israelites. There's no hiding the distaste that they have for you and your brethren, but you have a message to go in and deliver. Moses had a message to go in and to deliver to Pharaoh. Going into the most powerful man in the world and making demands of him doesn't seem like, an easy task. Hampered maybe by the fact that God's already told Moses, just so you know, he's not going to listen to you. Israel will, but Pharaoh's not going to listen to you. But you stand face to face with Pharaoh, and Moses indeed tells him, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. Now, I like that part, right? First of all, that's obedient to the command that the Lord had given back in chapter number 3. That was what Moses was required to request of Pharaoh, that they go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that they might hold a sacrifice and a feast unto the Lord. That's actually fairly reasonable. You would think. Pharaoh's a believer in many gods. You would think seemingly the least that he could do was show respect unto the God of Moses or the gods of Israel. But you know how that goes. If there's one God that's going to be criticized, if there's one God that's going to be rejected, it's the God of the Bible, right? That's something that we face, right? There's this, in our culture, there's almost this tolerance for every other belief system but the true worship of God, right? True Christianity. There's so much more of a fascination with Buddhist ideas or Far Eastern religion. There's a toleration. I wouldn't say there's a great love for, but there's certainly at least a toleration amongst most people for, the Islamic religion, for Muslims and what they believe. The least tolerated people are those that have and believe in the true worship of God. I'm not talking about the ecumenical way of, all those that want to blend everything together. I'm talking about the true worship of God. It always seems like that's the one everybody gets hung up on. Pharaoh can have any number of gods that Egypt had, but the God of Israel, nah, we're not going to show respect unto that God. We're not going to let you go those 3 days' journey into the wilderness. It's a reasonable request. If it is indeed 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million people, 3 days' journey isn't that far physically by the time you count all the stops and all the work that you need to do. But here's Pharaoh's response in verse number 2. Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go." Why should Pharaoh obey the God of slaves? Is that what's going through his mind here? Is he judging the God of Moses and the God of Israel by their circumstances, by what he sees in them, that let you go and serve your God? Who's your Lord? Who is your God? You're talking about the God of slaves? You're talking about the God of a people that are in submission, or a God of people that are in slavery and that are in bondage? I don't know your God. And because I don't know your God, I'm not going to obey his voice. That is a tough question that Pharaoh asks, right? Because the rest of us know the story. When he says, "Who is the Lord?" you and I already know that he's going to find out. He will eventually find out who the Lord is of Moses and of the Israelites. If he could have only seen the answer to that question was soon to come, he will see who the Lord is. It is also interesting to note what he says there in verse number 2. He says two things at the end. I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. And who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? I don't know him, and I'm not going to obey him. Okay? Who's the Lord that I should obey him, and I know him not? Now keep those two things in mind. I don't know him, I'm not going to obey him. And turn to 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. Who does the Bible say is prime to fall under the judgment of God? Who does the Bible say is prime to fall under the judgment of God? Here's what it says, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 8. In flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not God and that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Do you know those today that are very subject to the wrath of God, to the judgment of God? You know who that falls upon? Those that don't know him and those that don't obey. What did Pharaoh say? I don't know him, and I'm not going to obey him. We put all that together, and you and I can see, even, knowing the part of the story, of course, that we do, but if we just know the rest of the scriptures, we know, that's not a good starting place for Pharaoh. That's who's ripe for judgment. That's who God plans in his purpose and his ultimate purpose to ultimately show his vengeance upon in this world, his wrath upon those that know him not and that won't obey. And Pharaoh is taunting with that. Pharaoh is loud about that and boisterous. I don't know your God, and I'm not going to obey his voice. So that's how this contest starts. Moses does indeed do what he's told to do. He goes into Pharaoh, let my people go that they may hold a feast to me. And Pharaoh's answer is an emphatic no. I don't know him, and I will not hear his voice. I will not obey his voice. And so the contest has begun. Verse number 3, and they said, the God of the Hebrews hath met with us. Let us go, we pray thee, 3 days' journey into the desert, and sacrifice unto the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. And the king of Egypt said unto them, wherefore do ye, Moses and Aaron, let the people from their works? Get you unto your burdens. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 21, verse 1, the Bible says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. In light of that verse, some people question or maybe would wonder, why does God allow Israel to continue in bondage? If God indeed controls the heart of the king in his hand, and he can turn it about at whatever time and whatever way he desires or would purpose, why this way? Why not bring immediate deliverance? This is already setting up to be more difficult than we thought it might be, right? If you didn't know the story, go in and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And the answer is an emphatic no. Well, there's a few reasons for that. There's a few reasons why God maybe wouldn't bring immediate deliverance. Of course, first of all, God is going to create a situation here. We already know this, but create a situation where his ultimate power is going to be revealed. He's told us that. There is also an aspect, we would say, secondly, that God teaches his people patience in all situations. God is also going to give a warning over this next several chapters, and in this contest, he's going to give a warning to his people not to be led astray by false teachers. You remember, we're going to see this when the plagues hit. Pharaoh's magicians are able to perform some of those to a certain degree. And lest we be led astray by false teachers, continue on in patience and watching the hand of the Lord. And God is also exposing the true blindness and cruelty of man's heart. God is setting a backdrop here for us to see who he is once and for all. Now, when they return in verse number 3 and they say, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Well, you don't know who he is, but it's our God, the God of this people that are in bondage. And he has spoken to us, and he has told us to go 3 days' journey into the desert and sacrifice. And just so you know, if our God's voice is not obeyed, you should know what he's powerful enough to send. They speak there about pestilence or with the sword. The God of the Hebrews is not one that would take disobedience lightly, right? That's not just someone that you say, I don't know him, I've never met him, I don't have to obey his voice. It's not quite that simple, Pharaoh. Our God is one that when he gives an order, when he gives a command, he expects that it be obeyed. And Pharaoh's response again in verse number 4 is very condescending when he says, wherefore do ye, Moses and Aaron, let the people from their works? Now Pharaoh was obviously upset. It seems possibly from the context that Moses' arrival and his acceptance by the elders of Israel has kind of caused a little bit of stir. Maybe the people have kind of slacked off in their burdens. Maybe there's an expectation that deliverance is going to immediately come. And Pharaoh, not only is he saying no, but he's also getting a little frustrated. You know, whatever your presence has brought, Moses, the people here, they've let from their works. The people are slacking off. Get back to work. Right? That's what he's saying in verse number 4. Get back to work. Let's read a stretch of verses here then. Verse number 5. And Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land now are many, and ye make them rest from their burdens. Pharaoh commanded the same day that taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick as heretofore. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. And the tale of bricks, which they did make heretofore, ye shall lay upon them. Ye shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, let us go and sacrifice unto our God. Let there more work be laid upon the men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. This shows the cruelty of Pharaoh and these taskmasters of Egypt. Now, we talked about this toward the beginning when Israel was put into bondage, but Israel was responsible in part of their slavery and part of their bondage. They made bricks for the treasure cities, for the places that would be built in Egypt. They would make bricks. And the way that they would make those bricks is that they would gather mud, and they would take some straw and they would, kind of chop it up a little bit, but then they would put that straw down in the mud pits, and they would just grind it in, and they would step in it, and they would work it in, and they'd work it in, and they'd work it in. And as it took as that straw would get worked in, they could take that mud, put it in a form or some kind of shape, and let it harden out in the sun, and that's how they would make those bricks. Pharaoh says, okay, tell you what these people are? I think he says it there in verse number 8. They be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, let us go and sacrifice. You know what? These people are nothing but just a bunch of lazy bums. They are just trying to get out of work. This doesn't have anything to do with their God. It doesn't have anything to do with a sacrifice. These people have gotten, enthralled with Moses that's returned, but they're idle. They just don't want to work. I tell you what, we're going to give them more work to do, because now not only do they need to keep making bricks, but we're not going to give them the straw for it anymore. They're going to have to actually go out and collect the straw themselves. More work, right? That is more work. By the way, if you think Israel has a lot of free time right now, you would be incorrect. Okay? Slavery is not a 9-to-5 job. This is a hard, cruel life, and it has just been added to. We're not going to give you straw anymore. You go out and find it. But the tale of bricks, it can't diminish. Now, what does that mean? Well, as soon as we get to the next usage of it, I'll explain, because there's actually two different uses of that word tale here in this passage. Verse 9, he says, let their more work be laid upon the men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. That's typical of Pharaoh, right? When the Lord is not known, often his words or commands just seem like vain words, right? We struggle with that, right? When we try to share the gospel, or we try to share God's word with those that are lost around us, or those that really don't have much of an interest or a concern for the things of the Lord or his word, sometimes the message that we bring or the thoughts that we share with people just write them off. They just seem like empty or vain words. It doesn't seem like something that's believable. It doesn't seem like something that has much force behind it. People don't want to believe that. And Pharaoh says the same thing. We need to put these guys back to work. They're starting to believe nonsense, and they're getting on our nerves, and it's time to put them back to work. And let's put a stop to this little rebellion that Moses thinks he's going to lead. Tell you what, take the straw away. Give them more work to do. Verse 10. And the taskmasters of the people went out, and their officers, and they spake to the people, saying, thus saith Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. Go ye, get you straw where ye can find it, yet not aught of your work shall be diminished. You cannot return anything less. So the people were scattered abroad throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble instead of straw. And the taskmasters hasted them, saying, fulfill your works, your daily tasks, as when there was straw. And the officers of the children of Israel, which Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and demanded, wherefore have ye not fulfilled your task in making brick, both yesterday and today, as heretofore? Guess what happened when Israel wasn't given the straw to make those bricks? They weren't able to make as many as they were previously. You know why? Because now some of their time had to be spent going and finding straw and trying to clean up the stubble from the last batches of straw that came and where some maybe spilled out. And inevitably, as could be expected, that they're not able to do as much. Right? Can you imagine, according to verse number 14, it says that they were beaten. You imagine if I literally came up to you and said, you have to do twice as much work tomorrow, and if you don't do it, you get beaten. It's impossible. It's not realistic, right? This is a demand that has put Israel in an unwinnable position. It's just an impossible task. And not only that, but just the criticism and the harsh words that are added to it, the mockery in verse number 14. Wherefore have ye not fulfilled your task? What's going on? How come you can't meet your quota? How come you can't get your bricks? What's going on? What? You're not working as hard. You're not making as much as you were previously. Well, duh. It's obvious the reason. But the children of Israel were being beaten for it. They were being beaten. The officers of the children of Israel were beaten and demanded, why have you not fulfilled your task? Then the officers of the children of Israel came and cried unto Pharaoh, saying, Wherefore dealest thou thus with thy servants? There is no straw given us unto thy servants, and they say to us, make brick. And behold, thy servants are beaten, but the fault is in thine own people. The elders here, they go to Pharaoh, and they're like, listen, what's the deal? Like, why are you treating us this way? You tell us no straw, and then when we can't make as many bricks, you beat us. This isn't our fault. This is your fault. This is your people. Well, you all are causing this. What's the deal? Why are you treating us this way? And then in verse 17, he said, you're idle. You're idle. You're lazy. You don't work very hard. Put a little more effort into it. Therefore ye say, let us go and do sacrifice to the Lord. Go therefore now and work, for there shall no straw be given you, yet ye shall deliver the tale of bricks. Get out of here. You're lazy. You're looking for a day off. That's why it didn't have anything to do with sacrifice. You're trying to get out of work. That's why you say, let us go sacrifice. Get back to work. I'm not giving you any straw, and I expect the tale of bricks to continue. Now, the word tale is an interesting word, okay? And I like the way that it uses it here. It's actually two different words. The word in verse number 8, when it says the tale of bricks, and the word in verse number 18 that mentions the tale of bricks, that's actually two different Hebrew words. The one in verse number 8 is the word mathkaneth, and it deals with proportion. That Hebrew word deals with proportion or size. They weren't allowed to slack off in the size of the bricks that they made, right? Okay, well, if you're going to cut our straw supply, maybe we can just make the bricks a little smaller and maybe still meet our quota. No, they couldn't do that. The word in verse number 18, tale, is the word taken, and it refers to a fixed quantity. So it's a different word. In one verse it means a proportion, and in one verse it means a quantity. I like that, right? Because no matter how you cut it, the explanation is that Pharaoh was not going to give them any straw, but they had to return exactly what they were making previously. And they couldn't short it on size, and they couldn't short it on quantity. And you and I know what a difficult task this is going to be. If I just told you, you have to do twice as much work as you did yesterday, and if you don't, I'm going to beat you. Twice as many math pages, twice as many science pages, twice as many chores around the house, twice as many, everything, twice as much. Everybody got real quiet. You say, please don't do that. That sounds impossible. Yeah, it really is. And that is the treatment that Pharaoh is executing here upon the children of Israel. And when they didn't meet it, they were beaten. And drives them further and further and further down. So verse number 19, the officers of the children of Israel did see that they were in evil case. After it was said, ye shall not minish aught from your bricks of your daily task. And they met Moses and Aaron, who stood in the way as they came forth from Pharaoh. And they said unto them, the Lord look upon you and judge, because ye have made our savor to be abhorred in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to slay us. Well, after complaining to Pharaoh, what do you expect? This is your fault. You told us no straw, and then we can't make as many bricks and we're beaten, but the fault is not ours, the fault is thine. Well, after telling that to Pharaoh, then guess what they do? Moses, this is your fault. And you've put a sword in their hand to slay us. You've come back with these promises, and you've just given him reason to treat us more harshly. Moses, why did you have to do that? Why did you have to give them more ammunition? Why did you just have to give them more reason to hate us and make our lives more miserable and more difficult? I think of all the times, right, after the children of Israel left the land of Egypt, And you see, and we've preached about it before, Brother John has, I have, and you see all the times along the journey that Israel kind of starts to complain, and times that they've kind of turned against Moses here and there. That started pretty early in this process. The first time things didn't go the way that they wanted or the way that they thought that they should, they've turned on him. They've turned against Moses. The Lord look upon you and judge. Moses, this is your fault. You've made us to be abhorred in the eyes of Pharaoh, and you've put a sword in their hand to slay us. Moses, if we die, if we get any more beatings, this is your fault. So the title, we're off to a rough start. This isn't the way that we would necessarily thought that it was going to go, right? Now, we knew Pharaoh wasn't going to listen. We knew Pharaoh was going to say no. We knew that. I don't know if we knew all of this. I don't know if we knew that immediately, not only was he going to say no, but he was going to make life immensely harder on Israel. Things are going to get worse before they get better. And Moses struggled with that. Now, as it's been said, and I'm certainly not the only one. In fact, I've got a quote here. William MacDonald said, "Opposition from within the ranks is often harder to deal or harder to bear than persecution from without." When people turn on you, and it's those closest to you, your friends, your kin, your family, that's hard to deal with. We knew Pharaoh was going to be hard to deal with. God didn't make any false promises about that. Oh no, go ahead, it'll be okay. No, we knew this is going to be a challenge. Pharaoh's not going to just willingly listen from the get-go. But it's okay. And Moses maybe starts to wonder, did I bite off more than I could chew? Look at verse 22. "And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, Lord, wherefore or why hast thou so evil entreated this people? Why is it that thou hast sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he hath done evil to this people, neither hast thou delivered thy people at all. Why, Lord? Why have you even sent me? I came here, I even came in your name. But since I got here, things have only gotten worse. And you haven't kept your promise. Why?" This is difficult, right? You get the sense that, yes, even though Moses had the promise that Pharaoh's not going to listen, you almost get the sense now that maybe there was some expectation that he'll say no, but God's going to deliver us anyway, right? That this is going to work out. Pharaoh will say no, but we'll perform these miracles, and it won't be long, and God's going to deliver us. That is not the way that this is going to happen. This is not going to be an easy, a quick fix. There are a number of things being developed here. God is going to continue to develop in Israel a desire for redemption, okay? A desire for salvation from Egypt. He is going to develop the hardness of Pharaoh's heart so that all may see that the judgments that fall upon Egypt are right and true. And he's going to develop who he is, that he has power over Pharaoh, over the gods of Egypt, over nature, over all circumstances. Okay, there is much at play here, and that is going to take a little bit more to develop than just the first meeting. Maybe Moses missed that. Maybe he misunderstood that, and maybe there was some hopes in the back of his mind that, okay, Pharaoh will say no, but I guess God's going to figure a way to get us out of here anyway. God's going to get him out of there, but it's going to take more than this, okay? Pharaoh's heart is indeed hard, but that hardness has not yet been put to full use yet, okay? And Moses is obviously discouraged, and he begins to question. And I hope you don't do that part, right? If we do not see immediate results, If things do not necessarily work out immediately the way that we would hoped or the way that we would expected them to, let me encourage you to try not to lose faith. I'm not pretending that that's easy. You know, sometimes when you get expectations or you get your hopes built up, it's very difficult to deal with those things not coming to pass, right? You'd almost rather not get your hopes up or your expectations up than to get them up just to see them come down, right? You'd rather be like me and just be pessimistic about everything. But if you do find yourself with a level of expectation, let me kindly encourage you to remember that God's not bound to your expectation of what He does next, okay? God's not bound to what our assumption is of the way things should work or the order in which things should happen. Trust God, okay? That's going to be difficult if you've already preset expectations. If you've already set in your heart and mind how you think God's going to work, if He doesn't do that, you're going to be prone to feel disappointed in Him or question Him or wonder why He's doing what He's doing. There are times that we do indeed wonder what God is doing, and there are times that maybe even in a humble way we've come to Him in prayer and just, pleaded our heart. Lord, please help me understand. Please show me what you're doing. If we're not careful, though, if we make too many assumptions or we try to put God in a box and assume, okay, this is how He's going to do it, this is what's going to come next, when that doesn't happen, you might be more prone to disappointment in Him. Stand and watch Him work, okay? Things got worse before they got better. I don't think Moses thought it was going to work out that way. Now, it did. And now the people are questioning him, and he's questioning God. When we get into chapter 6 next week, though, we're going to find God hasn't forgotten His promise. He's actually going to repeat 7 different I wills in the next stretch of verses. We'll talk about those. God has not forgotten His promises to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, to Moses. Okay? He knows what He's doing. He has a plan. That plan is working. Okay? Pharaoh's hard heart is being revealed. Israel's desire for redemption is going to increase as they are ground a little further lower and a little further lower. Okay? God does indeed know what He's doing. So while we're off to a rough start, we're encouraged, okay, keep trusting. Okay? Believe Him. Believe God's promises. Don't turn against Him. Okay? Don't turn against Him. All right, let's have a word of prayer. Thank you.